Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I have gotten better at Hearthstone because of Sudoku puzzles. First, what I want to do is pull up a puzzle and talk about the process that I use to solve that puzzle. And then after that, I'll get into how a Sudoku puzzle correlates to Hearthstone and how I use the concepts to improve my Hearthstone game. In this example Sudoku puzzle, what I'm going to talk about first is how to solve a Sudoku puzzle. And part of that is what is a Sudoku puzzle for those who may not know. We see a bunch of numbers here scattered around on this grid. Now, with the Sudoku puzzle, you have sections that all each need to have numbers 1 through 9. For example, if we look at this middle square, we see a 1, 5, 8, and 9. The missing numbers need to be 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, so that this box has a 1 through 9. Now also, each row and column needs to have the numbers 1 through 9. So when I'm solving a Sudoku puzzle, the way that I first start this is taking a look at rows across and up and down in sets of 3. For example, let's first take a look at this chunk of 3 here. Now, the way that my mind works is to look at each row going across, and I just look to see if there are 2 of the same number within those 3 rows. And we have 2 of those, for example, the 8s. Now, since each row or each column can only contain 1 of each of the numbers 1 through 9, we know that going across, the first top 2 rows have a number 8 in them already. So we need to figure out where 8 would be in this 3rd row. Now, we also know that the number 8 cannot be in the same 3x3 square where there already is an 8. So that means that our 8 must be in this square and this row. So the 8 must go in one of those 2 squares. The next step I do is to look down the 2 columns where those empty squares are to see if that number is already in one of those columns. Unfortunately, in this example, we see that there is not. So right now, we don't know which of the 2 boxes the 8 will go in. So part of my process then is, okay, I can't fill that in yet. That is information I don't have. I don't know yet. I just know that the 8 will go in one of those 2 empty squares. So I backtrack and take a look and see if there's other numbers. So I can see even in this example here, we have 2 1s. So we know we need to fill in a 1 in this square, and it will be in this bottom row. Looking down these 2 rows, we're looking to see if one of these columns already has a number 1, and we see it does in this middle column. So by process of elimination, we can fill in the number 1 in that box. Now looking down each of the 3 columns, going vertically, we can now see that there are 3 1s in these 3 columns, number 1 in each of the 3 squares. So then the next step is just to repeat this process with the various numbers around the puzzle, alternating between looking at the columns and rows versus the 3x3 squares. Once we have a little bit more of the numbers filled in within a square itself, we can start to look within that 3x3 square to try to figure out what numbers are missing and if we can fill any of those in. Here I've already filled in 2 of the numbers missing, and the next step is to start looking to see which numbers still need to be filled in. So here we have a 1, 2, 3, so the next number would be 4. Now if we go with the same method we used previously and use the columns and rows looking across and vertically to check if those numbers are in the column or row already. So in this example, the first number we're going to look for that is needed is number 4. We look across and vertically, and we see there's just not enough information here to fill in where number 4 could possibly go. Number 4 could possibly go in any of these spots. So next we go to number 5. I always just go in the numerical order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I use that same process over and over. Every time I go to the next number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It helps me stay focused on what number I need to do next instead of trying to think and skip around. So we determined that we cannot fill in number 4, so let's look and see if we can fill in where the number 5 goes. Now looking in the columns and rows, for the 4 spaces that are missing, we see there is a number 5 in the middle. So the 5 cannot go in that center column. So we start to eliminate which square the number 5 can go in. We still don't have enough information to fill in the number 5. We see there's already a 6. So let's go ahead and look at 7. We also see that the middle row has a number 7. So again, the 7 and the 5 cannot go in the center column. But again, still not enough information here to fill in where the 7 does go. We see this square already has an 8. So let's go to the number 9. So again, looking at the columns and rows, we find where the other 9s are and eliminate where in our square 9 cannot go. This leaves only one possibility for where we can enter the number 9. So we can go back and look through the options again after we've filled in a number to see if we can fill in any of the other numbers based on the numbers we have filled in. One big thing I'd like to point out here is using this method, you may not be able to answer everything, and that's okay. It can be really difficult trying to fill in columns, rows, and squares completely without trying to fill in other information. And sometimes it's impossible to do that. You have to know other information before you can find the numbers for certain spots. That's all great and well when you're looking at a Sudoku puzzle, but how does that correspond to Hearthstone? And the first step is thinking about what I have left in my deck. So one example of thinking about things that are left in your deck can be found in Highlander Hunter, and in the interactions with Scavenger's Ingenuity, which draws a beast, and Diving Griffin, which has a battle cry that draws another rush minion from your deck. Many of the Highlander Hunter decks that are fairly popular are running very minimal beasts and rush minions. In this list, Diving Griffin is a rush and a beast, Zixor Apex Predator is also a rush and a beast, and Faceless Corruptor is also a rush minion. So early in the game, if you play a Scavenger's Ingenuity, this list will draw you either a Diving Griffin or a Zixor Apex Predator. They are the only 2 beasts being run in the list, so you've already eliminated your options. You're looking at the specific numbers like we saw in the Sudoku puzzle. This way you're looking across, just as we did with those 8s and the 1s early on in the example, you are knowing there are only 2 options for you to draw from that card. This can help you plan your turns accordingly. You can look at if you play Scavenger's Ingenuity on turn 2. Both the Diving Griffin and Zixor cost 3 mana, so you will be able to play it the following turn. If you play Scavenger's Ingenuity in a later turn, how much mana will you need to have left over to be able to play those still? Are you drawing them for the next turn or for the current turn, and how you want to play that turn out? Again, Diving Griffin drawing a rush minion, there are only 2 other rush minions in the deck, with the Zixor and Faceless Corruptor. Now, this can change slightly. After Zixor has died, it does put Zixor Prime into your deck, which is also a rush minion and a beast. So if you actually are playing a game and you end up having Zixor and Faceless Corruptor in your hand, you have to make a decision about playing the Diving Griffin if that's in your hand as well. If you have all 3 in your hand, Diving Griffin being played out will draw you nothing. But if you play out the Zixor first, let it die to put that Zixor Prime into your deck that is now a rush minion, the Diving Griffin will now draw you the Zixor Prime. Again, this is the same method that we used for the Sudoku puzzle in that process of limiting what information you're looking at. So both the Scavenger's Ingenuity and the Diving Griffin draw mechanics, you're looking to draw specific things, but before you just play these cards out, you need to pull that back. Instead of looking just at those specific numbers, like in our Sudoku puzzle example, you want to look at how this will play out. What will you draw? Will you be able to play it now? Are you playing this in preparation for next turn? And you're looking at the whole column, the whole row all at once. How it all fits together in that column. Now, another example of knowing your deck can also be seen in Highlander Mage. And you're looking at cards like Tortollan Pilgrim. You get to discover a copy of a spell that's in your deck and cast it with random targets. Knowing which spells are left in your deck is important to deciding if you want to play this card. When you hit turn 8 or later, you can just play this card out, but it might not give you the effect that you're looking for if you don't know what spells are in your deck. Now, because this also has the effect of cast it with random targets, the wording on the spell is also important. Take, for example, Rolling Fireball. This just reads deal 8 damage to a minion. So this can actually hit your own minions and not your opponent's. Now, if you have a lot of spells that have this to a minion, and you don't have any spells remaining in your deck that target an enemy, you might not be wanting to play that Tortollan Pilgrim. It might be better to actually look for a different answer from your hand. Whereas cards like Deep Freeze specifically say freeze an enemy. So whether your opponent has minions on the board or no minions, this guaranteed will freeze something on your opponent's side of the board. Looking at how Tortollan Pilgrim functions, it's really important to know what is in your deck, how that will affect you playing this card, and what it is that you're looking to do on that turn. Are you trying to find a board freeze for your opponent's minions? Are you trying to find an AoE for your opponent's board? Is your opponent's board empty and you're hoping for something like Power of Creation to put more things on your side of the board? Having that information and that knowledge of what is still in your deck and how these interactions work is very, very important to improving at Hearthstone and making more informed decisions throughout the course of a game. Making those improved plays and that thinking process in the long run will make you a better player and help you increase your win rate overall. Some games, there is the RNG aspect, or you might have a fairly high chance of hitting a spell you want with the Pilgrim, and maybe it just doesn't work out and you don't get one of the choices that you were looking for. But was the decision to play the Pilgrim correct based on what's left in your deck? Or did you just play it out, not really thinking through what spells are left in your deck and how that would affect the board state? Those thought processes will help you in the long run over the course of multiple games. Now, I also use this same process during a game to think about how I want to spend my mana by thinking things like, okay, if you have 6 mana to start the turn, what is your best play using all of that mana? Is it one single minion that uses all 6 mana? Or a spell that uses all 6 mana? Is it something that costs 4 and a hero power for 2? Is it 2 3-cost minions? But in a way, you're looking and you're eliminating the possibilities in your hand, just like with the Sudoku puzzle we did when you're eliminating which numbers can go in which squares. And the final thing I want to bring up is when looking at matchups. Now, there are a lot of resources to be able to use. HS Replay, Vicious Syndicate, a lot of third-party trackers and information to look at matchups and the chances that one deck has versus another deck. When looking at matchups, sometimes they can be fairly close together. You're looking at, maybe a 47 to 53% chance of winning a certain matchup. Those are very close together, and they're going to be based on card draw, a little bit of RNG, and who gets what in the match. Now, with those games, you're going to want to look very closely at which cards you're keeping in the mulligan, how you're playing each turn, and how your resources are panning out versus what they are playing. There's a lot more that goes into that. Those are just kind of the basic concepts of each turn. But when you look at a matchup that is close, each decision matters a little bit more in those matchups. And maybe who draws better does decide the game. But when you look at a matchup that is more one-sided, you have to decide and take that information and that knowledge and say, am I very unfavored? And if so, playing more risky during that match is generally how you find the 3 or 4 out of 10 times that you win that matchup. But sometimes it's just knowing that you are in an unfavored position in the game, knowing those numbers, and having that information to make the decision that you need to take a risky play. You have to go for an out, because if you don't, you'll probably just lose anyways. And I think that all of that correlates with that Sudoku example that we looked at. You have to decide if you have enough information or not. And if you don't have enough information, you need to quickly decide to move on to a different decision. You can't spend your whole turn thinking about one play path, because by the time you decide that you don't have enough information, you're running out of time. And unfortunately, sometimes the animations can take a while, or you don't see a play until it's too late. So you have to assess if you have enough information and how you are going to play out those turns. Now, again, this video is fairly vague. I didn't want to go too in depth, but if this is something that people enjoyed and they want me to go more in depth into each concept, I would love to hear about it. Please let me know in the comments below. Find me on Twitter or on Twitch during my live streams and let me know that you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear and see more.